Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Rocha Revolution. We are so excited to be live with you today with our brother Marcos Velez from Texas. Marcos, good to be here, brother.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, brother.
Now, y'all may not know that Marco is in the runoff for the Texas Lieutenant Governor. Marcos, tell folks about your origin story of getting to Texas.
Sure. Uh, Look, grew up in Pasadena, which is a
Nice.
small city just outside of Houston. My mom cleaned hotel rooms, and really, I tell people all the time, life was really tough, but she got a good union job, and that was life changing for us. Catapulted us up into the middle class. Chuck knows all about unions, how they change people's lives, and so really, when I grew up and was looking for a job in industrial repair, I went to go work in the same industry. Got me a union job working at uh, got a couple different jobs after high school, but ended up in a union job working in an oil refinery. And that's where I became a labor activist fighting for working class people. So, I mean, after that, it's a wrap. You go and you fight for safer working conditions, expanded pay, dignity, and equity on the job. And, it's really something that if you have the passion for it, it's one of the most rewarding careers there is out there.
So, Marcos, were you involved in a local union, worked your way up in a local union, and then went on international staff?
Yes, sir. Yes, I was a member of Local 227. Secretary, group president, local president, negotiated the return to work after our strike, and then went to go work for the International Union after the big oil strike that we had, I don't know, about 12 years ago.
For those of you who've never been to Pasadena, Texas, when you head south out of Houston, there's lots of refinery work between there and Galveston and Beaumont. I forgot what they called that triangle there, but there's a lot of petroleum refined in that area, right, Marcos?
Yeah, in Beaumont, that's the Golden Triangle.
That's what I was trying to think of. Back in 1996, there was a runoff election in after the regular November elections because of, ironically, redistricting. Tom DeLay had done mid-decade redistricting, and I just finished running a campaign for the AFL and the steelworkers in Dallas Fort Worth, and they moved me to Houston, and I worked in Houston for a couple of weeks because Ken Benson had gotten to a runoff, and then they moved me to Galveston, Texas, because Nick Lampson was in a runoff down there, and I'll never forget, Marcos. I was working in Texas City, Texas, on Texas Avenue at the Operator Engineers Local in Texas City, Texas.
Texas
You don't
City,
get much more than Texas City, Texas on Texas Avenue.
exactly. A lot of refineries up that way as well.
So tell our audience a little bit about what this race is shaping up to look like. But before that, what was your inspiration for this working class Latino kid who grew up in Pasadena, working class, to ever think that they could run for lieutenant governor?
Hey, look, I believe that government should be run by normal everyday people, and we've gotten so far away from that concept. I've watched my children get older, and I look at the job market that's facing them as someone that goes in and you look at how we sit when we try to bargain. We don't have collective bargaining in public sector jobs in the state of Texas. You look at they're crushing just about every government institution, and I really felt like it was one of those things that, hey, if not now, then when? Talked with my family, talked with some of my friends, and really decided that, hey, we're going to make a go at this. Even if our message doesn't resonate, we're going to make them talk about our issues. And you look, it's really humbling because our message has resonated. People are sick and tired of being left behind. They've gone from living paycheck to paycheck to living overdraft to overdraft. They're sending their kids to schools where teachers can barely pay their bills. And so, I mean, it was really the state of the nation and the state of Texas that I think all of us are questioning right now. Hey, how do I make a change? And I just figured I would try to do it from a by entering politics.
I think that I've been involved in campaigns a long time and watched lots of candidates come and go. And when I talk about joining the Democratic Party, everybody here knows my story of growing up in a trailer house in East Texas, going to work where my dad worked in a tire factory in East Texas. Back then, I joined the Rubber Workers Union before we merged with the Steelworkers in '95. And my local union president, who'd been there for a long time and ran the Central Labor Council in Smith County, told me once when I hired in, there was a 4-hour initiation negotiated where new hires spent 4 hours at the union hall. So we'd go over and learn about the union because y'all should know that Texas is a quote unquote right to work. Horrible name for a law that's bullshit, but you don't have to join the union. But we went over and the union had smartly, we had negotiated getting folks in. And John Nash, who just passed away a few weeks ago, well, a couple months ago now, I spoke at his funeral in East Texas about why we were part of the union and why we joined the union and what a PAC card was and why we give money to the PAC. And it was then that he explained to me how the Democrats were the party of working people and Republicans were the party of the bosses and the folks who own many of the companies and care about their bottom line, not as much about the workers. And the workers band together for this thing called a union. And over the years, working for Dick Gephardt and John Edwards and lots of labor icons along the way, we steadfast with that philosophy of workers coming together collectively for power was a way that the Democratic Party gained its power as well. But recently, in the last 10, 15 years, a lot of that had to do with trade policy. The Democratic Party has strayed from the working class values that I grew up with in East Texas and would go on to work on campaigns around the country. It seems like to me, Marcos, and you please correct me if I'm wrong, especially with your candidacy, Jose's candidacy, Graham Plattner's candidacy, Bob Brooks in Pennsylvania's candidacy, and I can name 10 other candidates who are working class men and women who have now decided that we want to try to get the party and pull the party back to the working class values that really built the party and built the middle class. Is that one of the reasons you're running for office?
That's a huge reason. I mean, the Democratic Party, they always talk about, well, why is our message not resonating with voters? What do we have to do to win elections? And the reality is, you need better candidates. You can't expect people to turn out for candidates that time and time again have left working people behind. And I think that's why so many union men, so many working class people feel motivated to run, because who better to advocate for us than ourselves?
No, I think you're right. And another question around the issue set and what you've been seeing, you have had the privilege now, and with your servicing contracts, for those, I shouldn't talk union just with me and you. When I talk about him servicing local unions, he's going around his district, his geographical area of Texas, working with his local unions, negotiating contracts, probably dealing with some grievances or third case arbitrations. But as you travel around with your regular job, and now as a candidate for lieutenant governor, tell my listeners some of the issues that you're hearing from average everyday voters when you're at picnics, when you're at festivals, when you're at swap meets, when you're at county conventions. What are you hearing as the top two, three, four issues that folks are talking about right now?
So, look, the number one issue, this is not a hoax. Affordability is the biggest issue for people across the state. When you sit there and you look, a 35-gallon tank of diesel is $167. I can tell you that because that's what I paid yesterday. I mean,
Wow.
but when you talk to, look, we represent guys that drive truck, that work in transport. Some of these guys are parking their rigs. Some of these larger companies are choosing to idle trucks because the cost of fuel is so ridiculously high. You look at the cost of housing right now, and we have people that are delaying retirement because they're worried about their adult children. So they're staying in the workforce longer. But guess what? When they stay in the workforce longer, that bottlenecks, because now we're not opening up jobs for young people to enter. You know how it works. For somebody to move into a job, there has to be a vacancy. And so it's a ripple effect. The affordability issue is the biggest issue driving people right now. And I believe that when you look at our current elected leadership, they're not addressing it because it does not affect them. You have people that are millionaires, some of them, even more wealthy than that represent us. And again, the decisions they make do not impact them. And so affordability is the biggest one. Then when you move beyond affordability, people are concerned about healthcare access, especially in rural Texas, where funding cuts have led to a reduction in the quality of healthcare that we receive in rural Texas. And schools are a big deal. We can't fund our schools. We can't pay our teachers. We're more worried about what hangs on the classroom wall than whether or not we can pay a living wage. And I mean, and those are the big issues right now that I'm hearing.
And as you travel around the Texas is as big as a country. As you travel around Texas, and you hear these regional, everybody in DC wants to talk about whatever the latest culture war is when we're actually at war. They want to talk about pronouns when actually, to your point, prices are really what are on people's minds because Republicans always want to make it about a culture war or whatever has to do with not everybody's day to day lives, trying to scare working class people around a social issue to vote for them. The point of what I'm saying there is that as you have sat in the bargaining rooms and negotiated contracts, if it's like it was when I used to negotiate contracts, the company may be doing okay. They may be making a little money. And so you go in and you try to get the workers a share of that money, and so that they're making more per hour while they're doing their jobs. That's the whole reason we have collective bargaining, is when the company does good, when we work hard, everybody should benefit. But my last 10 years in the union, when we would negotiate contracts, if we were agreement that we all should get a 50-cent raise on a 3-year contract every year, maybe, I would find that many times, most of the time, that wage increase would get eat up in the rising cost of healthcare. Do you still see that happening today? And I haven't negotiated a contract in 20 years. I'm just curious if that still goes on today.
It's a very real concern, and it's why we're leaning more back into basing wage increases on like the cost of living, right? Because you don't want to take a 3% raise, but then your healthcare premiums eat up 2.8% of that raise. It's really important. But the saddest part about that is it's not even that that isn't a reality. It's that for people who work in non-unionized workplaces, they don't even get that 3, 4, 5% wage increase. So their healthcare is going up, but they're not getting the same raises that everyone else is getting at our job sites.
While folks are listening, if you want to support now, Marco still has a runoff, and the runoff is not till May. And so he still has another election to run with the top two system. It'll be a super smaller turnout than what we've seen with this explosion of people. I'm going to get to that who voted in the primary. Can you give us a website where folks can go and donate?
Yes, sir. They can go to velez4texas.com. They can read about the campaign, and if they feel inclined to donate, there's a contribution box at the top.
So that's VELEZFOR, Texas.
Yes,
We'll
sir.
say it again, VELEZ 4, that's FOR, Texas.com. You can go there and you can give, you can see and read about his bio. It's really something special that's happening in Texas. Now, all of my followers and listeners know that I work for James Tallarico. I work for lots of congressional folks in Texas. I'm really curious, Marcos, because you're on the ground there every day. I get to come home and eat some Mexican food and come back to DC and act like I know everything like most consultants do. But I really would like to know what your explanation is for what we saw in the primary, not the reason James Tallarico won, but why we saw such an explosion in turnout in the Democratic primary. Now, I've been on TV talking about this and other places, explaining to folks that something's happening there. And the case that I make, and I want to ask you why, or your opinion why, is that more folks participated in the primary this th- this last March than had ever participated in a primary in Texas before, even going back through presidential elections like Hillary Clinton versus Barack Obama, which was a giant turnout in Texas, as it should have been. But something is happening that would spur a lot of people who normally don't participate in a primary and participating in this one at historic numbers. What are you seeing on the ground that you think is causing that, Marcos?
I think there's a couple different things going on. One, the advent of social media has allowed us to reach more people at a faster rate, and so people that would normally be low propensity voters that aren't really informed as to the issues, they're seeing in real time their neighbors being shoved into vans and kidnapped off the street. They're seeing the soaring cost of living in the state, and they're watching opportunities slip away from them. And so people feel motivated to do something, and they're looking for a way that they can participate in the process, and they did that through voting. I think that the Democratic Party has to be careful not to sit on its laurels and take those voters for granted, because if we want them to return in November, we actually have to deliver candidates that'll motivate and inspire them to come out again.
There's an overarching anxiety that lays over a lot of working class neighborhoods. And for all of you who haven't been from Texas or haven't been to Texas in a while, you should know that Republicans have been in charge of almost everything in Texas statewide for over 30 years. So when Marcos goes around talking to folks, the first thing he will say to somebody is, has your life gotten better in the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? Uh, if it hasn't, it's because Republicans have been in charge of our public schools, in charge of most of our government. They've been in charge of our electrical grid that we can't even keep operating in the summer months when it's really hot. They've been in charge of all kinds of things that have failed the state. Now folks are have an anxiety. When everybody's fat and happy, When everybody's belly's full and gas is cheap, folks will forgive a lot of things. But when things are bad, and when folks feel that economic anxiety of, I'm just not sure I can make it, and what do I have to cut this week because my utility bill has doubled? Now, when they live through that, I put that up like a fist and say, this is just all these anxieties that grumble around with people. And for those of you watching, I'm shaking my fist around, showing the anxiety. And then you lay over the top of it your other fist, which is in the Latino community and lots of others. There's this anxiety of the way that the administration and our state government has demonized brown and black people. A lot around this misconception of immigration. Sure, if any immigrant comes here and breaks some violent law and is bad, sure, let's deport them. I'll pick them up in my truck and take them myself. But that's less than 1/10 of 1% of all immigrants. Most immigrants who come to Texas, like my family did, my grandparents actually, was to seek a better life and to live the American dream. Whether they come documented or undocumented back in the day, they've been here and been a part of our system. And I think that's another reason why you saw the turnout is the industries along the border and a lot of industrial places in the big cities are failing now because they don't have any workers. Where this immigrant population were building houses and doing lots of work, where now they've been scared away, and now you have businesses that are like, I voted for Trump because I wanted to have things cheaper. I wanted somebody that was tough and all of this bullshit. But now they're like, I'm losing millions of dollars because he's wanting to deport folks who haven't broke any laws other than being brought here maybe as a kid 20 years ago who've been working here and paying Social Security taxes. Have you seen that kind of anxiety in the immigrant communities and Latino communities in the bigger cities?
I see that anxiety in my neighborhood. I mean, look, the reality is for people that don't live in Texas, it's really easy to buy into the propaganda that you see on some of these news stations. The reality is we have to accept that the immigration issue, quotation marks, it wasn't created by people, it was created by the government. Congress changed the rules on who could work within the state or within the country legally, but we never had a replacement for that workforce. We understand that a lot of the economies in the South have been propped up by either free or low paid labor for as long as we can remember. And every time we progress to a different system, it's just another group of people that we're exploiting. And so we needed the labor. And it was easy to continue to allow them to come and do the work that needed to be done and turn a blind eye to it. But when the Republicans figured out that they could use it as a political talking point, all of a sudden we had to ramp up these efforts and start shoving people into vans. But the reality is there is no workforce to replace the people that are being attacked on the streets.
I think you're right. And I think that folks are really getting like fed up. And I don't think everybody, like I know that the Kool-Aid drinkers that are with MAGA will always be there, right? But there's one thing that I've learned in running campaigns for many, many years is that when Donald Trump is not on the ticket, folks act different. And he does turn out folks, and I give him credit for being able to do that. But, Marcos, I talk about this a lot, is that a lot of his messaging, and it was smart for him to do that and ignorant for Democrats to walk away from some of this messaging. When he talks about revitalizing manufacturing, even though he don't mean it, when he talks about bringing jobs back to America, even though he don't mean it, when he talks about draining the swamp of folks who think they're better than you, even though it's his people making the money, like he's saying the right thing, but he don't really care about any of it. But for some working class guy who's just super annoyed by his life every day, or woman, they're looking for an outlet and something that's different. That's where Marcos comes in because Marcos is different than most candidates out there. And I'll say it so he don't have to because he would never say this, but I will say it, is that Marcos is the first person from outside of the political establishment, from outside of the politics of norm, who's a regular working class guy who got involved in the union, got involved in his community, has gotten involved to say, here, I will step up to run because there needs to be more working class people representing us in the state capital of Austin. We need somebody like that to be the lieutenant governor who's actually the architect behind legislation in Texas. You got to have somebody who have lived through the real feelings and the real pain of what workers go through. And is that resonating? Do people identify that with you when they meet you?
No, it's a good message that resonates, but the other thing is it's an authentic message. I think a lot of politicians try to co-opt the struggle of normal working class people, and it comes off as inauthentic. When I go, I mean, how many politicians go door knock in trailer parks? I have, and I'll tell you, when you talk to those people, it doesn't matter whether they're black, white, they could be Asian Pacific Islanders. People understand that, like, while we may be a little different, the forces oppressing us in the state of Texas are exactly the same, and so people are excited to have different options, and they're excited to be able to go into the polling location and not have to hold their nose and vote for the better of two evils. They can vote for someone that's like them, that's going to advocate for issues that benefit them.
No, I think that that's right. Me and you were lucky to be with Ruben Gallego Monday night, and we were at a veterans town hall in San Antonio put together by Vote Vets. I'm wearing one of Vote Vets' shirts right now. I've worked with Vote Vets now for, oh my God, 15 years as one of my clients. John Schultz is a dear friend of mine. Um, but the point I make is around how Ruben overperformed in a state that Kamala Harris lost by a lot. And he still won in that state and overperformed with Latinos and with Latino men, which had been a problem for the Democratic Party because of what Marcos just said. Folks can tell when you're authentic. When they meet Ruben Gallego or see one of his commercials, they automatically connect with a kid who grew up with a single mom, three sisters, who went to work in doing construction and all kinds of jobs to help his mama pay the bills, but then never would have dreamed he would have ever been elected to the state house or to Congress, much less the U.S. Senate. So when he talks about that pain of what he lived through as a kid and then going and deploying as an enlisted man in the Marines overseas to fight wars, and then he comes back to protest the war because he saw how unfairly he was done, that authentic message you can't teach people. They see right through it. It's like when Marcos talks about working with his hands, talks about working with workers to negotiate collective bargaining so they have a power and a voice at work. But you can see it right away that he knows what he's talking about because he's one of them. That's the authenticity that people hunger for, so much so, and I don't mean to shake my finger at y'all, but it makes me mad that they would believe an orange carnival barker named Donald Trump who thinks he's saying the right things, even though he's never worked a day in his life. But he wants to act like he's all big and bad. He's like every dude who used to come to the nightclub where I used to bounce when I was a kid. Everybody who's in there talking about whooping your ass ain't never going to whoop your ass. It's the guy in the corner who's being quiet. He will whoop your ass. That's who you better watch. Don't you agree?
I agree. Hey, and as someone who's taken a whooping, I can tell you it's like normal guys understand that adage because it's always the guy in the corner that you don't mess with, you know?
Right. As we get towards the end of this thing, I want you to talk a little bit about what this race is shaping up and what's your strategy to win this runoff and how people can help.
Sure. So look, we understood entering this race that it was a long shot. We entered a race with about 8 weeks, and we really had to strategize on where we thought our message would resonate most. I knew that if we spent all of our time in the big cities, we would get big city votes, but you don't win statewide by pulling just the big cities. So we spent a lot of time in West Texas and more rural parts of the state. And I think if you look at the map of how the primary played out, hey, our message resonated with the voters that have drifted away from the party. Our message is not going to change because that's my message. We're just going to try to focus on a wider part of the state. And so the runoff has bought us, another 11 weeks. And so we're going to use that time to our advantage, and we're going to get out and we're going to continue meeting and talking with people about issues that benefit everyday Texans. The best thing people can do if they want to help, they can go to our website, they can contribute. They can also help share our messages on social media. This is a really big state, and so it's almost impossible to meet with. It is impossible to meet with every single person in the state. But if you talk to one or two of your friends, turnout in runoff elections is extremely low. This is really going to be a battle of who can turn out the most voters. I think that we can turn out the most voters because, again, we're fighting for things that will benefit all Texans, raising wages, expanding healthcare access, improving funding for schools. And I think those are things that at the end of the day, everyone wants their kids to have good jobs. Everyone wants to have good jobs themselves. And it's as simple as showing up for early voting or showing up on May the 26th and casting their ballot for our campaign.
Well, I want to appreciate you being with us today. Everybody should go, and I'm going to give you the website again because I pulled it up. It's a great website. It's VELEZ, that's his last name, FOR, Texas.com. And you can donate there. You can sign up. Make sure you're following and liking all of his stuff on socials. I started following the Instagram page yesterday, actually, and I was like, there's a lot of great content there. As an old Mexican redneck, I'm pretty good on the internet, Marcos. Don't let these clothes fool you now. I appreciate you being on with me today. And for all the rest of you, I'll see you next week on the Rocha Revolution. Take care, Marcos.
Thank you.
Be good, brother.
You too, bud.